For over 17 years, John Turner had wandered the streets of his city, a phantom of what he once was. Each day felt like an exercise in survival, as he endured the relentless humiliation and rejection from a society that regarded him as nothing more than a burden. His cardboard sign, weathered and frayed, bore the words, "Used to be someone." Those words, while hauntingly true, were often met with derision or indifference, a painful irony that cut deeper than any blade. At 62 years old, John's once sturdy frame had been reduced to skin and bones. His gaunt face and sunken eyes told the story of countless days spent without food or shelter. He braved the bitter cold and blistering heat with a stoic resolve, each passing day a testament to his endurance against the harsh realities of life on the streets. On a fateful afternoon, John found himself resting on his usual bench outside a bustling shopping center, watching the tide of people moving around him, their lives spinning forth in a flurry of activity. He held his sign high, hoping that someone would pause long enough to muster a glimmer of compassion, perhaps to spare a few loose coins to help him stave off hunger for another day. But instead of kindness, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Used to be someone, huh?" A well-dressed man approached, his expensive shoes clicking against the pavement, a cruel sneer forming on his lips. "I doubt someone like you used to be anyone." With a swift kick, he sent John's begging cup flying across the sidewalk, scattering the meager collection of coins and vanishing hope. John felt a rush of humiliation course through him, the laughter from the man echoing cruelly in his ears. The sting of the man's words burrowed into his heart like a dagger, but the pain was nothing new. It was a familiar companion after years of similar encounters. As John crawled to the ground, his arthritic joints protesting, he fought back the urge to let despair consume him. Glimmers of change had once danced in his life, but they were dimmed now, overtaken by an acute awareness of his worthlessness in the eyes of the world. He fumbled for the scattered coins that had been his lifeline, heart-heavy as he took note of the furtive glances from passers-by who averted their gazes, unwilling to acknowledge his existence. "Look at you, crawling around like a pathetic worm," the man taunted from a distance. John tried to block it all out, focusing instead on retrieving what little he had left. But the torment lingered in the air, a reminder that the world had no place for someone like him. By the time he had gathered all the coins, the man had long since walked away, leaving John with nothing but the ache in his bones and the sting of rejection. Realizing his spot had yielded no kindness, he began to walk. Each unsteady step was a reminder of the distance between who he had been and who he was now. As he shuffled along the bustling sidewalk, the familiar aroma of a nearby hot dog stand wafted past him, teasing his empty stomach. Mustering what courage he had left, he approached the vendor. "Excuse me," he mumbled, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you have any leftovers? Anything at all? I have a little money." He held out the few coins he had managed to collect, an offering of desperation. The vendor barely glanced at John's outstretched hand before waving him away. "Not enough," he grunted, dismissively. "I don't serve your kind. You're scaring away my customers. Get lost." With his heart heavy, John shuffled away, parched and empty. He spotted a water fountain nearby, a small oasis in his desert of despair. As he bent down to drink, he felt a presence beside him. A young mother stood there, her toddler son clutching an empty water bottle, clearly waiting for his turn. He straightened, attempting a smile as small as a flicker. "Hello there, little fellow," he said softly, waving gently. But the mother's reaction was immediate and fierce. She yanked her son back, her face contorted with disgust. "Don't look at him, sweetie," she hissed, loud enough for John to hear. "Come on, we'll fill your bottle somewhere else." John's shoulders slumped lower than ever as he watched them briskly walk away. This treatment had become a painful norm, enduring countless instances of being treated like a monster, an entity to be feared and avoided. No matter how many times it happened, it never became any easier. His thirst was somewhat quenched, but the feelings of isolation clawed at him. He crossed the street, making his way toward a park he could see in the distance. The promise of a shady bench called to him, offering a moment's relief from the glaring sun and the stares of those around him. As he settled onto the cool wooden slats, he let out a heavy sigh. He watched joggers trot by, dog walkers leash in hand, and families out for leisurely strolls. They all appeared so carefree, living lives he could barely remember. The normalcy of it all felt like a cruel joke, a painful reminder of everything he had lost. Lost in thought, he was startled by the sound of children's laughter nearby, a group pointing in his direction. "Why is that man so ugly?" one child asked loudly. "He lives on the street," another replied. "My dad says only crazy people do that." A third, bolder than the rest, suggested, "Should we scare him? I bet he'd run away." Before their cruel impulse could manifest, the teacher noticed, quickly herding the group away, throwing John a look of pure disgust, as if his mere presence was contaminating her charges. Years ago, such interactions would have ignited a fire of anger or despair within him. But now, he felt nothing. The numbness that had settled over him scared him more than any harsh word or disgusted glance ever could. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting elongated shadows across the park, John found himself wondering how much longer he could bear this existence. Tears began to fall, silent drops carving paths through the grime on his cheeks. He curled in on himself, the weight of his despair becoming too much to bear. In that moment, on a park bench surrounded by the vibrant bustle of life, John Turner felt truly and utterly alone. Suddenly, a new sound broke through the city's hum, soft strumming of guitar strings pulling at John's focus. He lifted his head, his tear-stained eyes searching for the source. Not far from his bench, a young man was setting up a small performance area with an acoustic guitar hanging from a strap around his neck. Curiosity sparked in John as the musician began to play, and the first few chords rang out clearly. Recognition hit him. This was a melody he knew well, one that had been a favorite during his younger days. The notes washed over him, bringing back long-buried memories. He found himself mouthing the words along with the performer, the lyrics speaking of lost identity and faded glory, themes that resonated deeply with John's current situation. The song transported him back to a different time when he remembered listening to this very tune on the radio while driving to work, humming it while doing chores, even singing it as a lullaby for his young son. The bittersweet ache of those memories bubbled to the surface as the final notes faded away. For the first time in ages, John felt a genuine connection to another human being, even if it was just through a shared appreciation of music. Without thinking, he rose from the bench and approached the young musician, digging into his pocket to pull out one of his precious dollar bills. It was wrinkled and worn, but it was all he had. With a trembling hand, he dropped it into the open guitar case. "Thank you, sir," the young musician exclaimed, surprise evident on his face. "I'm glad you enjoyed it." A ghost of a smile flickered across John's weathered face, the briefest moment where he felt like a person again, not just a nameless, faceless man on the street. But as he turned away, reality came crashing back down, the weight of his existence settling once more onto his shoulders. With the sun climbing toward its zenith, John's stomach clenched painfully, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since morning. He recalled the alley behind a nearby supermarket where he occasionally found discarded food. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than going hungry. Heavy steps led him across the street, the city buzzing around him. He felt invisible, a shadow passing unnoticed through the bright colors of the day. When he reached the alley, another homeless man was already rummaging through the dumpster, elbow deep in the refuse. Not wanting to start a confrontation over territory, John hesitated, contemplating his next move. Suddenly, the back door to the supermarket burst open, and the store manager stormed out, his face clouded with anger. "Get out of here, you filthy bum," he shouted, advancing on the man at the dumpster. John watched, frozen with dread, as the manager grabbed the homeless man by his tattered coat, shoving him roughly to the ground. "If I see you here again, I'm calling the cops," he threatened, punctuating his words with a harsh kick to the fallen man's side. The scene unfolded before John in a visceral cascade of memories. This wasn't just an alley. He was back in Afghanistan, surrounded by the chaos and violence of war. The sounds of gunfire and the screams of his fellow soldiers faded out the city around him. Overwhelmed, John's legs buckled beneath him as he collapsed to the dirty pavement, breath coming in short, panicked gasps. He could smell the acrid scent of gunpowder and feel the oppressive heat of the desert sun beating down. The commotion drew the manager's attention, leaving the other man to scurry away. The manager turned his ire on John, stomping over to where he lay trembling on the ground. "Another one," he growled, gripping John's ragged clothes and hauling him to his feet. Get out of here. John struggled, caught between the present moment and memories that refused to leave him. Each word echoed like an explosion in his mind, the weight of his past trapping him in a twilight zone of despair and fear. The manager shoved him backward, the force causing John to stumble. The humiliation was raw and heavy, words filled with contempt twisting in the air around him. Damn homeless people, the manager spat. You're like sewer rats. With every further jab, John felt swallowed deeper into the shadows of his past, the memories more suffocating than the weight of his present. He staggered away from the alley, desperate to put distance between him and the horrifying scene, the haunting echoes of his memories clinging like a second skin. With no destination in mind, John wandered the heartless streets, lost in an urban labyrinth, fleeting glances of life around him contrasting sharply with the void inside. It wasn't long before he found himself standing before a neon liquor store sign, the bottles glimmering like false promises. A part of him knew that this path led to a destructive cycle, and yet, the pull of the familiar temptation was overwhelming. Pushing open the heavy door, John made his way to the cooler, every instinct urging him against it, yet the desire for numbness conquered all. Selecting a cheap bottle, John counted out the last of his money. The clerk watched, recognizing the desperation in his eyes. As he paid and took a long, bitter swig from the bottle, reality blurred around him. Everything faded as the alcohol dulled the sharp edges of his consciousness. But even within that momentary relief, he couldn't silence the haunting thoughts of his son, of the family he had left behind. Each sip drew him closer to the oblivion he craved, and somewhere deep within, a flicker of hope tried to surface. He stumbled out of the store, legs heavy with the weight of his decisions. A familiar bench awaited him, his refuge amidst the indifference of passing souls. As he settled onto it, warmth washed over him briefly before the harsh reality seeped back in, smothering enthusiasm for change. As he closed his eyes, drifting off into uncertain sleep, John Turner felt the pull of memories mingling with the rush of alcohol. He had once been someone, a man with dreams, with purpose, who now found himself nothing more than a shadow. And so, enveloped in dreams of better days where laughter-filled rooms and a boy's innocent eyes shone with love, John lost himself in the depths of despair, teetering on the edge of existence, waiting for the glimmer of hope to finally break through and remind him that he could still be someone again. As John drifted into a fitful sleep, the sounds of the city became a distant hum, merging with the faint echoes of music playing in his mind, weaving through the fabric of his fragmented memories. Images of a sun-drenched backyard filled with laughter and warmth flickered before him, memories of his son's joyous face filling him with a bittersweet ache. But this moment of nostalgia was fleeting. The weight of his current reality pressed heavily against his chest. With a sudden jolt, John was awakened by the honking of car horns and the chatter of busy pedestrians. Disoriented, he sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. The day was still bright, yet a storm was brewing in the distance. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, threatening a downpour that matched his mood. Feeling the familiar gnawing in his stomach, John rose from the bench, the remnants of sleep still clinging to him like a fog. He needed to do something, anything to stave off the hunger that pierced through his gut like an unwelcome intruder. The memory of the nearby liquor store danced in the back of his mind, but he pushed it away, realizing he needed something more substantial than booze to curb his relentless appetite. Navigating the streets, he spotted a small cafe with a bustling crowd outside, laughter mingling with the scent of freshly baked goods. Determined to try his luck, John stepped up to the counter, his heart racing with a mix of hope and anxiety. He could feel the stares of well-dressed patrons wrapped in the comfort of their lives, oblivious to the battle he fought every day. "Can I help you?" The barista's voice broke through his thoughts. She eyed him warily but maintained professional decorum. John opened his mouth, the words catching in his throat. He stuttered, suddenly feeling small and vulnerable. "I was wondering if you had any leftovers? Anything at all?" The barista's expression softened slightly, but she shook her head. "I'm sorry, sir, but we can't give away food. Not even scraps," he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "No, it's against store policy." Deflated, John turned away, feeling the sting of her rejection pierce through him once again. But just as he stepped outside the cafe, a commotion erupted. His gaze shifted towards the road, where two luxury SUVs pulled up to the curb, their glossy surfaces reflecting the darkening sky. From one of the vehicles emerged the man in the emerald blue vest, whose face sparked a flicker of recognition in John's mind. He watched with curiosity as the man approached a nearby sanitation worker, speaking animatedly. It appeared he was discussing a community project, but John's focus was solely on the figure he had so recently encountered, the man who had looked deep into his eyes, almost as if seeing him. The man turned and, as if sensing John's gaze, his eyes locked onto John's for a heartbeat. A look of surprise and something deeper passed between them. Was it empathy? Recognition? Questions swirled through John's mind. But before he could act on it, the man turned away, disappearing into the SUV. Feeling a strange pull of hope in his chest, John hesitated for a moment, torn between approaching the man for a second chance at connection and the urge to retreat into the shadows as he usually did. But what if this time was different? Seizing the moment, John stepped forward, instinct pushing him to reach out. Just as he made it to the curb, the money he had buried in his pocket clinked against a cold metal object, his slim wallet. In all the chaos, he had almost forgotten he'd kept that small bit of his former life tucked away. With shaky hands, he fished it out. Inside were a few bills his past self had managed to cling to, a small reminder of better days, days when things hadn't seemed so hopeless. The urge to call out to the man overridden by the fear of what rejection would taste like, he watched as the SUVs began to pull away, the moment slipping through his fingers like sand. Suddenly, the sound of laughter caught his attention again. A group of college students walking by glanced at him, their smiles and boisterous demeanor a stark contrast to his own existence. "Look at that guy. Bet he hasn't showered in weeks," one of them joked, laughter erupting as they continued on their way, leaving John at the edge of the world he no longer belonged to. Feeling overwhelmed, he retreated down an alley, grateful for the shadows enveloping him, easing the sting of humiliation. Leaning against the damp brick wall, he closed his eyes, seeking respite from the outside world. But the moment of sanctuary was short-lived as another memory surged to the forefront of his mind, half-formed, tangled threads pulling him back to a time when he felt truly alive. In the recesses of his memory, he saw himself holding his baby son in his arms, singing lullabies softly as the evening sun set outside their window. He could almost hear the soft coos from Fred, the warmth of childhood innocence radiating between them. But then the images twisted into a dark reality. Memories of deployment overshadowed those lighter moments. He remembered the chaos, the confusion, the shouts of his comrades, vibrant and terrifying all at once. He'd lost a part of himself in that war, absorbing the pain of loss as countless lives echoed in his mind. A distant sound pulled him from his reverie. A soft strumming of guitar notes floated down the alleyway, echoing the melody he had heard earlier. It was the same young musician, his voice mingling with the music, weaving a spell that tugged at John's heart once more. As he emerged from the shadows, John felt a flicker of familiarity. The melody ignited something deep within, a recognition of humanity amidst so much despair. Standing at the entrance of the alley, uncertainty clouded his mind still, but the music pulled him closer, urging him to recall who he was. He approached, hesitantly taking a seat on a weathered crate nearby. As he listened to the young man play, John closed his eyes, allowing the music to cascade over him like a warm wave. Each strum resonated with the songs of his past, the laughter, the hugs, the dreams. And in those fleeting moments, John wasn't just a nameless homeless man. He became part of something larger, reawakening buried emotions the streets had worked tirelessly to extinguish. When the song concluded, applause erupted from a small but appreciative crowd that had gathered. The young musician, clearly moved by the response, looked up and spotted John in the crowd. Their eyes met, and still something stirred within John, an ember of connection glowing hotter than before. With a breath catching in his throat, John stood, an instinctual desire pushing him forward. Before he could think better of it, he approached the young musician, who smiled brightly beneath a messy mop of hair. "Hey, you really sounded amazing," John said, his voice thicker than usual. The warmth of human interaction felt foreign yet revitalizing. "Thank you," the musician replied enthusiastically, his eyes lighting up. "I'm really glad you liked it. Music keeps me going." The honesty in his words resonated, and John couldn't help but smile despite himself. He glanced around, taking in the curious faces of the crowd before returning his focus to the musician. "Do you perform often?" "Whenever I can. I just love spreading good vibes. You know, it can be tough out here." The musician's excitement was contagious, but it sparked something heavier within John, a reminder of his own struggles. "Yeah, I know," John replied, the weight of those words carrying 1,000 untold stories. "Hey, if you can spare any change, I have a guitar case here for donations," the musician said, nodding toward the open case at his feet. "All of it helps." John shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of his own pockets, the bravado dissipating in the face of reality. He fished out the few coins he had left and dropped them into the case, feeling the sudden pull of hope flaring in his chest once again. But even as he gave, uncertainty gnawed at him. How did good people like this maintain such unwavering spirits in the face of adversity? Sensing the shift in atmosphere, the musician leaned closer. "Hey, if you ever want to jam or just talk, let me know. You look like you've got a story to tell." The invitation warmed John's heart. Nobody had asked him to share his story in years. Nobody had cared enough to listen. "Yeah, I've got a lot to say, but it's been a long road." The musician nodded, his expression shifting to one of understanding. "We all have our battles. Just remember that it's never too late to start again." That fleeting exchange, an impromptu connection, sparked something deep within John, a long-buried flicker of hope beginning to shine. The music played on, wrapping around him like an embrace he hadn't realized he had yearned for. Further down the street, the dark clouds rolled in, threatening rain as yet another cycle of rejection and knotted memories loomed over him. But amidst that tempest, a tiny flame had ignited, a reminder that he could still be seen. As John turned away, preparing to return to the unforgiving streets, the world around him felt different. Perhaps there was a spark of change waiting in the wings, urging him to grasp hold of the opportunities rushing past him, even as the rain began to fall and the sky threatened to unleash its fury. With the echoes of music swelling in his ears, John Turner took a cautious step forward, ready to discover what the next chapter might hold in store. A beginning woven with honesty, a future that could still be brightened by the memory of laughter, and that elusive feeling of being someone once more. As the rain drummed against the pavement, John found himself drawn back to the musician's corner, where he had left the faint scent of hope hanging in the air. He approached cautiously, not wanting to intrude, but the young man's smile and the sound of his guitar welcomed him like an old friend. "You're back," the musician exclaimed, nodding towards the street. "I figured it was either the rain driving you in or the music calling you out." John chuckled, feeling a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in months. "A bit of both, I think." The musician laughed, a contagious joy that drew a smile from John's lips. "I'll take that as a yes to our impromptu jam session." Before John could protest, the musician began to strum a lively tune, the notes dancing in the rain-soaked air. John couldn't help but tap his foot, the music weaving a spell of freedom around him. As they played, the crowd that had gathered to watch John's initial encounter with the musician began to grow. People from all walks of life, each with their own story, were drawn to the infectious energy emanating from the young musician and the quiet, yet determined, John Turner. The music continued to flow, a river of hope and resilience that flowed through the streets, touching hearts and souls. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, John felt alive, his fingers moving in time with the music, his heart beating in sync with the young musician. As the rain began to let up, casting a warm rainbow across the sky, John felt a spark within him ignite. He looked at the musician, their eyes meeting in a moment of understanding. "You know," John said, his voice low and husky, "I think I might have a story or two to share." The musician nodded, his face alight with excitement. "I knew it. I can tell when someone's got a story burning inside them." John took a deep breath, the memories he had been carrying for so long beginning to surface. "It's a long story," he warned. The musician grinned, his fingers still moving over the strings of his guitar. "We've got all day, man, or all night, however long it takes." And so, in the midst of the storm, John Turner began to tell his story. He spoke of deployment, of war, of loss and pain, of the struggles that had left him homeless and alone. As he spoke, the musician listened intently, his eyes never leaving John's face. The crowd around them grew smaller, as if they were drawing the listeners in with an invisible thread, weaving a web of empathy and compassion. The story poured out of John like a river, carrying with it the weight of his experiences, the pain and the heartache. But it also carried hope, a glimmer of light that had kept him going, a sense of purpose that had driven him to keep moving forward. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the street in a warm, golden light, John finished his story. The crowd around them erupted into applause, a standing ovation that brought tears to John's eyes. The musician smiled, his face aglow with warmth. "Thank you for sharing your story," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for trusting me with it." John shook his head, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. "You helped me to remember," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You helped me to remember who I am." The musician nodded, his eyes shining with understanding. "You are a survivor," he said. "You are a warrior. And you are alive." As the crowd dispersed, leaving John and the musician alone on the street, John felt a sense of freedom he hadn't experienced in years. He looked at the young musician, a smile spreading across his face. "Thanks," John said, his voice filled with emotion. "Thanks for the music. Thanks for listening." The musician grinned, his eyes sparkling with warmth. "Anytime, man," he said. "We're in this together, okay?" And as they walked off into the sunset, arm in arm, the city lights beginning to twinkle around them, John Turner knew that he was no longer alone. He had a friend, a brother, a fellow warrior who had listened to his story and had helped him to heal. As they disappeared into the night, the city's sounds receded, leaving behind a faint echo of music and a message of hope. "You are not alone," the city whispered. "You are not alone." And in that moment, John Turner knew that he was free. The morning sun rose gently over the city, filtering through the remnants of the night's rain and painting a tranquil scene that felt almost surreal. As John opened his eyes, he found himself stretched on a warm patch of grass in a small park, sunlight kissing his face and warmth wrapping around him like a tender embrace. It was the first dawn in a long while that he had felt a sense of peace. Beside him sat the young musician, still nursing the guitar he had lent to John the night before, a look of quiet determination etched across his face. "Hey, rise and shine," he called out, his voice vibrant and inviting. "Thought it was about time you joined the land of the living." John chuckled, despite the grogginess lingering in his bones. "What time is it?" "Early enough for a fresh start," the musician replied, a grin breaking across his face. "Coffee shop down the street opens soon. Want to grab a cup?" "Sounds great," John said, pushing himself up from the grass, the weight of yesterday's revelations lingering in his mind. Would the warmth he felt last night last through today? Or would he be swallowed up again by the cold grip of solitude? As they walked towards the cafe, their footsteps echoing softly on the damp sidewalk, John found that the streets felt alive with possibility. The morning air was cooler, each breath invigorating him, spurring him on with a new sense of purpose. The cafe was bustling, filled with chatter and laughter, a stark contrast to the quiet moments he had often spent alone. They ordered coffee, John opting for a simple black cup while the musician chose something frothy and sweet. "By the way," the musician said, leaning in conspiratorially as they settled into their seats, "I told you about my music, but I'd love to hear your dreams. What do you want to do now that you're reclaiming your life?" John paused, stirring his coffee absently as the question resonated deep within him. He had not truly considered the future since everything had spiraled. "I used to write," he admitted, the words spilling out before he fully processed their weight. "Songs, poetry, just stories about life, you know." The musician's eyes widened. "No way. You've got to show me some of your work. We could collaborate, mix your words with my music." "Really?" John asked, feeling a stir of excitement. The thought was exhilarating, and a strange flicker of confidence ignited within him. "I haven't written anything in years. Today's a new day. What do you say we find a corner somewhere later and I'll play some tunes while you write?" John nodded slowly, feeling the spark of possibility light up his spirit. "All right, let's do it." After their coffee, the two ventured into the nearby park where a large, ancient oak provided shade, inviting them to settle beneath its sprawling branches. John pulled out a small notepad he always kept tucked away, its pages worn and frayed, a relic of a time when his words flowed freely. As the young musician began to play a gentle melody, John felt the familiar tug of inspiration. He closed his eyes, allowing the notes to wash over him, nudging the memories he had tucked away, the laughter, the pain, the hope that had flickered across his path. He started to write, the words pouring out like rain after a drought. Lines of poetry emerged, weaving a tapestry of emotions and memories celebrating resilience, heartbreak, dreams, and friendship. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, John opened his eyes and looked at the musician, who was now lost in his own rhythm. These words, John said softly, they feel alive again. I haven't felt this in so long. The musician paused, looking over, a proud smile blooming on his face. I knew you had it in you. This is just the beginning. Together, they rode a wave of creativity, John's words painting vivid portraits while the musician's melodies brought them to life. They lost track of time, their laughter mingling with notes, as the park remained blissfully unaware of the transformation taking place beneath its branches. As dusk settled in, the shadows stretching across the ground, the two friends packed up, hearts full, ready to share their creations with the world. What do you think about performing together? The musician asked, tilting his head as they walked back towards the lively streets. Perform? In front of people? John considered, trepidation curling in his stomach. Why not? It's time to step out of the shadows, my friend. You have a story to tell, and people need to hear it. John took a deep breath, thoughts swirling. Okay, but only if we do it together. I can't do it alone. Deal? We make an awesome team, the musician said, laughter ringing in his voice. As they arrived back at the street corner where they had first met, a small crowd had gathered, intrigued by the musician's instrument. Let's give them a show, the musician exclaimed, nudging John forward just a touch. John's heart raced, cheeks flushed with the thrill of the moment. The crowd fell silent as the musician took his place at the center, strumming a gentle tune. When he gestured to John, he felt that familiar knot of fear twist deep within him. Yet, looking out at the expectant faces, the smiles, the nods, he took a deep breath and stepped forward. Hey everyone. I don't normally do this, but, his voice wavered, but the musician started strumming a well-known melody. The music flowed, and the encouragement from the crowd bathed him in warmth. He closed his eyes, allowing the words to surface, crafting his thoughts into audible waves. As he began to recite, the fear began to fade, overtaken by the rhythm, by the moment, and by the connection that hung in the air. Laughter and sighs erupted from the crowd as John poured his heart out. He spoke of memories, of hopes, of battles fought and won, connecting experiences through shared laughter woven with soulful ballads. For the first time in ages, John felt the world shift around him. He was no longer just a shadow, a fleeting figure on the streets. He was a voice, resolute and clear, full of light and warmth. When he finished, a wave of applause rolled out, a ripple of appreciation that surged through him like a breath of fresh air. The musician beamed with pride, another friend joining in the celebration of their collaborative spirit. See, you were amazing, the musician said, jumping back to his side as they both took a bow. Told you this was going to be fun. Their connection thrummed like the strings of the guitar, an unspoken bond of understanding blossoming between them. As the sky turned deep shades of blue and stars began to twinkle overhead, John knew that he had only scratched the surface of his journey. With this new dream pulsing in his heart, the magic of creation, camaraderie, and the affirmation that he wasn't just a forgotten warrior, John Turner embraced the path ahead, ready to reclaim not only his voice but his life. Through music and words, he would tell his story, a story unspooled with the shared threads of friendship, laughter, and love that would carry him forward, igniting hope where darkness had once lingered. As the last notes echoed into the night, John glanced up at the vast sky, the universe unfolding like a tapestry above him, and he felt the promise of new beginnings swirling around his soul. Everything was finally lined up. With each heartbeat, he felt the weight of the past lighten, unveiling the beauty of the road ahead.